In recent months, one and the same name has been heard with increasing frequency in the corridors of the American military-industrial complex. And it is not Lockheed Martin, not Northrop Grumman, and not even Boeing, but Elon Musk's companies Tesla and SpaceX, which, according to several sources close to the US Department of Defense, may have gained access to one of the most classified and unprecedented projects in the history of the Pentagon. Formally, there has been no announcement, no contracts have appeared in public registries, but this is exactly how programs begin in the US that people later speak about in a whisper for decades. According to sources cited by analysts in the Washington Post, Defense News and Politico, in the context of rapidly escalating confrontation with China, the Pentagon has decided to take a radical step and involve leaders of the technology industry in the creation of a fundamentally new class of combat aviation. Not just another stealth fighter, but a next-generation platform whose characteristics could render all existing aircraft obsolete even before entering mass production. The concept refers to a fighter that will combine near-absolute low observability, autonomy at the level of artificial intelligence, and fundamentally new propulsion solutions capable of providing both hypersonic modes and unprecedented maneuverability in the atmosphere. And this is precisely where, according to insiders, the Pentagon, for the first time in history, decided to go beyond the classical defense industry and turn to companies that have spent decades developing technologies of the future, but have never formally built combat aircraft. Sources emphasize that this does not mean Tesla or SpaceX will build a fighter from scratch. Such projects really do require decades and thousands of engineers. However, Musk's involvement may be targeted but critically important, especially in areas where traditional defense giants are objectively lagging behind. According to Defense Department interlocutors, Tesla's key task within the potential project may be the development of the world's first fully autonomous AI-based combat aircraft control system capable of operating without a pilot, making tactical decisions in real time, and engaging in combat under conditions where human reactions simply cannot keep up with speeds and G-forces. The Pentagon has long acknowledged that the era of manned aviation is approaching its limit and that future air battles will take place at such speeds and distances that the human operator becomes the weak link. That is why Tesla's experience in building autopilot systems, computer vision, and neural networks trained on billions of kilometers of real-world data is of particular interest to military strategists. According to sources, the initiative may involve creating an AI core that will not simply fly along a route, but analyze the battle space, interact with other unmanned platforms, make decisions on attack and evasion, and adapt to new threats without operator intervention. Classified Pentagon reports have repeatedly stressed that China is actively investing in autonomous combat systems, and the US cannot afford to fall behind in this area. But no less important a part of the potential project is said to be the role of SpaceX, and here, the stakes are even higher. According to analysts, discussions include the possibility of using SpaceX's developments in rocket engines, fuel systems, and thermal protection to create a next-generation universal power unit capable of operating both in the atmosphere and at near-space altitudes. In theory, such an engine would allow a fighter to accelerate to extreme speeds, abruptly change trajectory, and perform maneuvers unavailable to any modern aircraft. Sources stress that this is not about directly using Falcon or Raptor engines, but about transferring the principles, materials, and engineering solutions that SpaceX has refined over years under extreme load conditions. Inside the Pentagon, this project is reportedly already being called not just a fighter jet, but a dominance platform capable of reshaping the balance of power in the air for decades ahead. All of this is unfolding against the backdrop of a sharp escalation in the Asia-Pacific region, which in recent weeks has taken on a truly alarming character. Chinese naval vessels are increasingly approaching US carrier strike groups at minimally allowable distances, at times closing in to just a few hundred meters and demonstratively crossing their course, forcing US Navy crews to perform evasive maneuvers. According to US intelligence, these are not accidental incidents or navigation errors, but a deliberate pressure strategy that analysts have dubbed the shadow tactic, where the opponent's presence is physically felt but does not formally violate international law. Each such maneuver is carefully recorded by Chinese cameras and immediately broadcast in state media, where it is presented as proof that China is unafraid of the American military presence near its shores. Washington fully understands that such provocations are not just shows of force, but part of a broader strategy of deterrence and psychological pressure aimed at testing the response of the US and its allies. Against this backdrop, sources say the Pentagon is accelerating work on programs that until recently were considered too bold or risky. Particular concern in Washington is caused by preparations of the People's Liberation Army of China for a possible operation around Taiwan. Western intelligence is recording a sharp increase in exercises, the redeployment of amphibious ships, and the construction of logistics hubs and fuel depots along the Fujian coast directly across from the Taiwan Strait. Satellite imagery published by respected analytical centers shows that China is systematically rehearsing scenarios of blockade and mass strikes on the island. In this situation, the US is increasingly forced to consider the possibility of direct confrontation with a high-tech adversary, and traditional approaches to warfare no longer seem sufficient. That is why, according to a number of experts, involving Tesla and SpaceX in military programs looks less like fantasy and more like a logical step at a moment when global dominance is at stake. If the Pentagon has indeed decided to entrust Musk with key elements of such a project, it would mean that the US is ready to go all in, betting on the technologies of the future rather than on proven but aging solutions of the past. And although there are still no official confirmations, the number of indirect signals, leaks, and analytical overlaps raises a serious question. It may well be that right now, in closed hangars and laboratories, the foundation is being laid for the most radical military technology of the 21st century. In this logic, the involvement of Tesla and SpaceX looks like an attempt to leapfrog an entire generation of weapons at once by creating a system for which potential adversaries do not yet even have a conceptual answer. Experts emphasize that if such a project really exists, the first real tests may not take place publicly or at air bases, but in restricted zones over the ocean or at altitudes where civilian radars simply see nothing. In that case, the world will learn about it not from press releases, but from a sudden shift in the balance of power when the familiar rules of aerial combat stop working. And this is the main fear that, as they say, is now being discussed in whispers in Washington and Beijing at the same time. The next war may begin not with a shot and not with a declaration, but with the appearance in the sky of something that until yesterday was considered impossible.